I think most of you who have been with us over the years know that my office is dedicated to separating sense from nonsense, and we try to cast light into the dark world of pseudoscience. Well, today we're going to ask the question, is it fact or is it drivel? You know what? It depends on who you ask. It depends on who is speaking. For example, if you go and ask Dr. Joe Mercola, who is today regarded as the #1 source of misinformation online, you'll get the message that the vaccines are dangerous, that we're all undergoing some genetic experiment, and that it hasn't been properly tested. So we're going to believe him, this individual who flies in the face of all of the information we get from regulatory agencies like the Centers for Disease Control, from FDA, Health Canada, where we know from documented evidence, people are much more likely to die if they're not vaccinated. They're much more likely to end up in hospital if they're not vaccinated. So who are we going to believe? Or when it comes to Ivermectin, which I'm sure you've been hearing about in the last couple of weeks, are we going to believe the comedian Joe Rogan, who has become a cheerleader for this drug that is used for the treatment of parasites in animals? Or are we going to believe the researchers at reputable universities or hospitals who carry out proper studies, as you can see, giving the drug ivermectin, in this case 3 times daily, to patients, and seeing whether or not there's any difference in care between that or the conventional therapy? And what they find is that ivermectin had no benefit. Here, they are pursuing what is a proper scientific method. They are carrying out an experiment, giving one group known doses and comparing it to a control group. That's how we get information, not by listening to anecdotes from comedians like Joe Rogan. So this is what I want to discuss here today, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there that it's worthwhile to just take a look at a few examples to give you a feel for what is out there. Misinformation and disinformation are not the same. Misinformation is just wrong information, very often spread by people who don't know that it's wrong. You know, they're just clicking the forward button or whatever, something sounds good, and they spread it around. Disinformation is quite different. This is when people are spreading information that they actually know to be false, usually for some gain, financial gain, gain in terms of fame. My pal Mercola, who I mentioned before, I think falls into that category. He knows that what he is saying about the vaccine and about COVID being a hoax, he knows that he's hoaxing, but he's also trying to sell you all kinds of vitamins and dietary supplements and substances to boost your immune system, none of which has any scientific validity. But he's making money off of this. So that is disinformation. All right, well, let's take a look at some interesting examples. Football season has just begun in the US, and Tom Brady, of course, is the biggest star. And deservedly so. Of course, he's had a long, stellar career, winning more Super Bowls than anyone else as quarterback. And of course, when you have fame like that, you very easily mount a pedestal and spew out whatever information you want, and people will soak it up as if pearls were being cast. Well, Tom has written a book, as you can see, The Tom Brady Method. And in it, he describes his exercise regimen. He also describes his dietary regimen. Now, why would anyone listen to Tom Brady as a source of scientific advice? Not everything in this book is gobbledygook. Much of it is quackery, because so much of what he talks about here is based on another book by Alex Guerrero, who is Tom Brady's, or has been, his life coach. Well, when I hear that term life coach, you know, the red flag of alarm immediately goes up. What does that mean? Well, who is this Alex Guerrero, who has had such an influence on Tom Brady's life? He is actually a character with a somewhat, let us say, gentilely, somewhat of a clouded past. He calls himself Brady's spiritual guide, whatever that means, personal guru, and they are business partners. But this is a man who has lied about being a doctor. He has made false claims about all kinds of products for curing, preventing serious diseases like cancer and AIDS. And before he partnered with Tom Brady, he was sanctioned by federal regulators because he had presented himself as a medical doctor. He falsely promoted supplements that, you know, had no scientific background. And he offered a drink that protects your brain from the consequences of sports-related traumatic brain injury. And Brady endorsed this. There's a product called NeuroSafe that both he and Brady have promoted, seatbelt for the brain. There's absolutely no evidence that this can have any effect on traumatic brain injury, such as a concussion. But when Tom Brady puts his name to something, the product sells. And unfortunately, there's such little oversight over this world of dietary supplements that just about anything goes, especially in the US. And the FDA can remove something from the market if it has somehow caused harm, or if they can show it to be dangerous. But there's absolutely no requirement for pre-market testing or for supplying any evidence that the claims that they make have any kind of evidence behind them. Now let's look at the diet that Tom Brady suggests. Secret of youth? Well, he is 42 years old and he is still playing pretty well. So it, you know, behooves us to at least pay some attention to what he says. So his diet is 80% vegetables, only organic, whole grains, brown rice, quinoa, millet, beans. And then he also eats some lean meat. Of course, it's organic. Duck every now and then, fish, mostly wild salmon. He stays away from sugar, from white flour, MSG, raw olive oil, never cooking in it, only cooking with coconut. So as you can see, Himalayan pink salt, never uses iodized salt, no nightshade vegetables like tomatoes or peppers, mushrooms or eggplants. And you can see it's a pretty stringent kind of a regimen. He stays away from coffee because of the caffeine, doesn't eat any fungi, so no mushrooms, and no dairy. Let's take a look at this, bit of scrutiny here. All right, he avoids refined carbohydrates and unhealthy fats. I have no issue with that. I think that we eat too much sugar here. We eat too many products made with white flour. And of course, the saturated fats, mostly in animal fats, dairy, like butter. Yes, many North Americans consume too much of that. So there's no big issue here. Now, he eats 80% alkaline and 20% acidic foods. Here, we will take an issue, and I'll go into this in a bit more detail in a minute. This is absolute nonsense. Alkaline and acidic foods have no effect on the pH of your blood. He limits dairy intake. Some people, of course, have an adverse reaction to dairy. They have lactose intolerance. Other than that, there really is no reason to stay away from dairy, but neither is any reason to go overboard in consuming it. It is certainly possible to get enough calcium in your diet without consuming dairy. There are a lot of people who just don't feel well after they eat dairy, and it certainly is possible to have a reasonable diet without consuming dairy, so no big issue there. But then you do have to make sure that you're getting calcium from other source. Limiting salt intake, as he suggests, absolutely. Salt can drive up blood pressure. We tend to have too much salt in our diet, mostly from eating a lot of processed foods. Limiting nightshade vegetables. There's absolutely no scientific evidence for that. There's no reason to cut back on tomatoes or eggplants. In fact, tomatoes are one of the healthiest fruits. And yes, the tomato is indeed a fruit, not a vegetable. This is just a scientifically bankrupt idea to suggest that we should stay away from these specific vegetables. Limiting caffeine intake, not a bad idea, although of course we are learning that coffee, if anything, is good for us as long as it's consumed in limited amounts. The only problem with caffeine is that it does make some people jittery, and if you drink it late in the day, it may keep you from sleeping. But if you don't have any trouble with that, there's no reason to eliminate or limit caffeine. Tom limits alcohol intake. I think I will go along with that advice. I don't think we need to cut it out totally, but I think that we have plenty of evidence that alcohol is linked to a variety of issues. It is linked to breast cancer, it is linked to oral cancer. Of course, there's more to life than worrying about, every drop that goes into our mouth. But I think limiting alcohol intake, that's a good term, not eliminate it, but limiting it. Don't eat proteins with carbohydrates together. This is just a false idea of food combining. There's absolutely no scientific evidence to back that up. Yes, you can eat your meat with potatoes. Eating fruit alone. I'm a big proponent of eating fruit. But there's no validity scientifically that it should be eaten alone. You can eat fruit whenever you like. If you want to put strawberries into your salad, it is absolutely fine. Taking vitamin, mineral, and antioxidant supplements, that is highly questionable. In North America, if you have anywhere near a reasonable diet, you are not deficient in any of these. But a lot of people like to take this, the one-a-day vitamin mineral supplement for nutritional insurance. And I wouldn't be too much against that. It's cheap enough and it may do some good, but I don't think it's a sine qua non requirement in life. Taking omega-3 fats. Omega-3 fats do have value, and we know that people who eat fish have a high intake of omega-3 fats. We don't know that dietary supplements from omega-3 fats do any good. So I think that I would be in favor of eating fish regularly, but not in taking omega-3 supplements. Again, the evidence just isn't there. In terms of protein powder, if someone is a heavy-duty athlete doing a lot of weightlifting, they may benefit from a protein powder. And I think Tom Brady may fall into that category because, of course, football players train very, very vigorously. As far as probiotics go, probiotics essentially are the so-called good bacteria. You know that our body is full of bacteria. Our guts contain trillions of different bacterial cells, many, many species of bacteria, some of which are potentially disease-causing. Some of them are so-called good bacteria that keep the disease-causing ones in check. So if we kind of beef up on probiotics, that means that they will sort of outduel the bad bacteria. The only problem is that there's so much haziness about the probiotic supplements. Yes, there are many yogurts and kefir, etc., that contain probiotics. They contain specific bacteria. Whether or not they contain exactly the right kind of bacteria or whether everyone needs the same kind of bacteria, this is all up in the air. But there's certainly nothing wrong with eating yogurt or kefir on a regular basis. The trouble with ingesting bacteria is that we don't know just how effectively they travel through the stomach and make it into the intestines, because the stomach is very acidic and acids are the enemy of bacteria. So if anyone is going to make an attempt to really change the microbiota, which is the sum total of the bacteria in our gut, I think there's a much better chance of doing that with the capsules, which have the probiotic bacteria in them, because they travel through the stomach into the intestine. Now, Tom also suggests drinking 2.5 to 3 liters of water, none with meals. There's no scientific reason not to drink water with meals. And whether one should go out of one's way to drink water when you don't really need it is highly questionable. Your body pretty well tells you about the water. When you feel thirsty, you should drink. I don't think you have to make a goal of drinking 3 liters of water every day. I mean, that is quite a lot of water. And remember that whatever else you're consuming, whether it's milk or whether it's beverages, juices, etc., coffee, tea, they all contain water. So when scientists look at the advice that Tom Brady gives, advice that a lot of people go by, is that it just isn't scientifically evidence-based, although it is certainly not the most awful kind of advice that is out there. As you'll see in a few moments, there are people who are hawking much more nonsensical notions. The one bit here that I really want to emphasize and take issue with is this business of alkaline versus acidic foods. And there are numerous articles and books even written about this, and how the human body is not suited to be in an acid environment, and therefore we have to consume alkaline foods. Well, on this one, Tom Brady and many others just dropped the ball because this has really no scientific validity. Where does it all come from? This whole concept was introduced by Robert Young, not the one who was on Father Knows Best. This is a different kind of critter. And it was with his book, The pH Miracle, that this character inferred that you could cure virtually every disease in a miraculous way, whether it was diabetes or whether it was cancer. And he pretended to be a doctor, which he is not. He has no education at all that is relevant to this. And he, in fact, was arrested for practicing medicine without a license and put in jail. And he had to put out information about how he had no relevant background and that basically his injections of bicarbonate were bogus, and that he has no background in microbiology, hematology, or in anything else. But he sold millions of this book. The idea being that if you just alter the pH of your body and make it acidic, you can bypass disease. The truth of the matter is that our bloodstream is what we call a buffered environment. If it becomes too acidic, the body takes measures to neutralize the acidity. If it becomes too alkaline, the same thing happens in the other direction. And you cannot influence the pH of your blood by any food that you eat or by anything that you drink. Well, drinking alkaline water has become a big business. They will sell machines, revolutionary machines, they claim, for $3,000 to $4,000 that produce alkaline water. and they will give you all kinds of claims about boosting the immune system, keeping your kidneys healthy, improving circulation, improving digestion, etc. All of these benefits, none of which is scientifically proven, and I would venture to say none ever will be, because this is not scientifically plausible. No matter what kind of water you drink, it goes into the stomach. The stomach is an acid environment. Any alkaline material that goes into your stomach will be immediately neutralized by the acid in the stomach. It cannot have an effect on the pH of your blood. But there's big money to be made here with all of the water alkalizer, the revitalizers, etc. God's gift to mankind, they say. Well, no, this is really a gift to the marketers who sell this, because the profit margins are very high. What is very often done in situations like this is that they scratch around for some slight bit of science that then they can pervert and blow it totally out of proportion. For example, Otto Warburg received a Nobel Prize, this was back in the 1930s, for showing that cancer cells are more acidic than normal cells. This is actually a consequence of the disease. It's that the cancer cell produces acids. It's not that acid makes a cell cancerous. But of course, if you choose your words properly, you can take Otto Warburg's research and turn it into a cancer claim by saying cancer cells are acidic, which is true. Acids can be neutralized by alkalis, which is true. And then they talk about the benefits of drinking alkaline water, but those are unrelated, because the kind of water that you drink is not going to change the pH of the blood, and therefore it will not change the pH of cells. The truth of the matter is that the acid food theory is total nonsense. If you drink an acid, it will go into your stomach. It will not alter the pH of the stomach. If you drink an alkaline material, to go into the stomach, and the acid in the stomach will neutralize it. By the time that anything from the stomach gets into the intestine, the acids in it will be neutralized by the alkaline environment in the intestine. It has nothing to do with the blood. By the time that liquids get into the blood, they have been neutralized. They're too acidic, they're made alkaline, and vice versa. The only bodily secretion that you can alter by diet is the urine. Yes, you can make your urine more acidic by consuming acids. I mean, at one time, the claim was that if you have a urinary tract infection, you should be drinking cranberry juice because of its acidity. No. Cranberry juice actually may have an effect on urinary tract infections, but not because of its acidity. It is because there's a component in cranberries that prevents bacteria from sticking to the lining of the urinary tract. So cancer, diabetes, heart disease, none of this will respond to an alkaline diet. Now, that being said, though, the diet that they recommend as an alkaline diet tends to be a mostly vegetarian diet. So here we have a situation where something is being recommended for all the wrong reasons. Nothing wrong with eating lots of fruits and vegetables. They do all kinds of benefits because of the polyphenols that they contain, the various antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, but not because they can alter the pH of your blood. That's total nonsense. And it's not surprising that Robert Young spouts this nonsense because he's got no scientific background. And it's very irritating that there are people who climb up on pedestals with no science background whatsoever and yet can capture an audience. For example, this lady here, Brittany Arbach, she labels herself Montreal healthy girl. And she puts out videos. She gives all sorts of advice, some of which is astoundingly dumb. For example, she tells us, cancer is actually a good thing. It's the body's way of defending against poisonous environmental insults. That is just absolute nonsense. Cancer is not a good thing, never was and never will be. But of course, she also has a method of dealing with the big C, the truth about cancer and how to reverse it naturally. This is coming from someone who's not an epidemiologist, who's not a physician, who knows really nothing about cancer, as is very quickly evident from the kind of verbiage that she puts out there. Chemotherapy is simply put chemical therapy. That she doesn't like. There have never been more toxic and acidic drugs ever invented than those used in cancer treatment. She doesn't want people who are diagnosed with cancer to go to physicians to be exposed to chemotherapy. This poisons the body, she says. Of course, she has the answer to all of this. Our pal, Montreal healthy girl, knows how to turn the big C around. For example, with things like colloidal silver and various, silly regimens on diet. And of course, she is also into the alkaline diet thing. Now, the reason that I bring her up, even though she doesn't deserve to be brought up, she doesn't deserve to be part of a scientific discussion, but the reason I bring it up is because of the influence that these people have. Now, I don't think Brittany has as big an influence as Robert Young. She's more of a local silly phenomenon. But nevertheless, she does have a following. And it's disturbing when you see comments like this. If it was up to me, I would make you head of the FDA immediately. Life as we know it in America would never be the same again. But you would first need to be over here. That is, I guess this is coming from the US. Hi, Brittany. As I mentioned before to you, I've watched some of your videos. My wife recently was diagnosed with a cancerous kidney, a most likely stage 4 cancer. I like your juice, fast, and feast, and like to get the exact protocol. You cannot cure kidney cancer with any kind of diet. So the concern here is that this person is going to pay too much attention to this kind of thing, probably not enough attention to the proper medical advice that is being given. But what background does Brittany Orbach have to spout this kind of information? Nothing. She has a mail order diploma from this naturopathy online school. Well, naturopathy is a questionable business in the first place. The whole idea behind naturopathy is that nature can cure every disease as long as you give it the chance, that there's a natural cure for everything. That, of course, is absolutely not true. Nature is not benign. Nature features some of the most toxic substances to which we can ever be exposed. But in any case, there are some universities where they teach naturopathy. These are questionable, like Bastyr University in the US, and there's a school of naturopathy in Toronto. But she hasn't even gone to any of those. This is essentially a mail order diploma. It is just meaningless. Well, if you think that this is the ultimate absurdity, whenever we think we encounter the ultimate, there's always something else that comes along. For example, raw water. Raw water. What do we mean by that? I mean, isn't all water raw? We don't cook water. Okay, let's see what this is all about. This is the brainchild of a gentleman who calls himself Mukandi Singh, although that is not his real name. His real name is Christopher Sanborn. And he features pictures of himself like this, sitting cross-legged in a yoga position. I mean, of course, there's nothing wrong with yoga. Yoga is a valid practice. And he pictures himself in front of greenery and waterfalls. And the claim that he makes that the water that we drink, whether it's the water that comes out of our tap or whether it's bottled water that we buy, has been treated either with chlorine or ozone. It's been, quote, sterilized, which of course is not true. Yes, it's been filtered, irradiated. No, water is never irradiated. That's just nonsense. And this destroys all the natural probiotics found in raw spring water. Well, I suggested to you before what probiotics are. Probiotics are beneficial bacteria in the body. There are, of course, bacteria everywhere. No matter what sample of water you would pick up, somewhere there would be some bacteria in there because bacteria are just everywhere. His claim is that with water treatment, we are destroying the nutritional benefits of these probiotics in water, but there are no valid probiotics in water to start with. So what evidence does he have? Well, of course, he makes these bizarre claims that tap water is just toilet water with birth control drugs. And of course, then his personal anecdote about how he drank living spring water, as if water could be dead or alive. And he felt a surge of energy and peacefulness enter his being. He could never go back to drinking dead water again. Well, of course, water is not dead or alive. Water is just a substance, H2O molecules with lots of other things dissolved in it. But his claim is that it is these magical probiotics that you find in his version of living water, which comes from, some sort of spring source, is that will then alter our intestinal flora in a beneficial way. It will somehow add good bacteria to our gut. This is just fanciful, nonsensical thinking. To suggest that the water that he sells has benefits because it contains probiotics is just unscientific blather. The only thing I can say about the water that he sells is that he sells it in very nice jugs. They look like these crystal decanters. Now, of course, he has to boost his sales by trying to come up with some sort of scientific evidence. So here, for example, is the kind of evidence that he suggests that would make us buy his raw water. So this is a proper scientific paper published in a peer-reviewed journal. What did the researchers do here? They experimented on rodents. They wounded them because they wanted to study wound healing in the presence of different kinds of water. And they found that there was a spring water in Italy, nothing to do with the water that this guy sells, that indeed improved healing. That's an interesting observation. But this was in rats. It was with a totally different kind of water than the raw water that is being sold by this Singh guy for $64 a container. Albeit it's a nice container, but you of course have to return the container so that they will refill it. And of course there are pictures of him sitting in front of waterfalls, and as you can see, showing that he is filling the bottle from a pipe that supposedly comes directly from the spring. No, these bottles are not filled by dipping it into a spring. These bottles are filled with tap water. Which tap water? Tap water that comes from Madras, which is a town in Oregon. Now, it is true that there is a natural spring near the town of Oregon, and here it is, where the town indeed gets its water. This spring is an isolated area. There's no industry around. It does not need any kind of sophisticated treatment. And people have been drinking this water out of the tap in that area for over 40 years. And this is where this $64 bottle of water comes from. Promoted by this guy, Singh, who says that he never fit in at school, not surprising. He refused to conform to public school education because this, of course, is designed to make robots. He was always in trouble, I don't doubt that. They try to medicate me, I don't doubt that either. And of course, then he found this natural lifestyle, drinking this raw water. The truth is that this is just a scam. That's what this is. Selling tap water, which indeed may be good quality water, for $64 a bottle, suggesting that this has some sort of medicinal value. But aside from the nice bottle, of course, it's just nonsense. This is not the only water, though, that claims to have some sort of special benefit. There are all kinds of waters out there. Look at this one, Starkey water. Comes from 2 miles deep. Okay, that may be the case, but that's a so what? Just because it comes from 2 miles deep in the earth doesn't give it any kind of special property. Just makes for an interesting label. Then you have all kinds of others. There's your alkaline water, pH 10. But as I told you, you put that alkaline water into your stomach, it is immediately neutralized by the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. Then you have real water. You can see the blue bottle there, real water, as opposed to, I suppose, the synthetic water that other companies are selling. This is a huge industry, the water industry. And there are many, many issues here besides just the very questionable advertising. All the plastic that is being used to make these bottles, depleting of petroleum resources. These bottles should be recycled. Most of them are not. They end up in garbage. People are spending huge amounts of money for something that is readily available for a few pennies from the tap. If anyone is concerned about trace residues of some chemical in the water, you can get yourself a Brita filter or a zero water filter, and that will take care of that. All right, let's pursue a little bit more drivel. These decanters are very special. You put your water into them, and it will give the water special properties. I'm not kidding you. This is a real item. It is sold, and it is not cheap. Mouth blown of heavy metal-free glass. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It just means it's ordinary glass instead of lead-based glass, but that's what most glass is anyway. And it is the special design and the pattern of this decanter that will somehow give structure to water, which is supposed to have some benefit. Water doesn't have structure. Water is a fluid made up of H2O molecules. But the advertising here is that the bottle has a very special shape, which they refer to as the golden ratio. Now, without going into this, the golden ratio is a sort of a mathematical formula that describes the width and the height of an object and is supposed to give you the most pleasing kind of shape. So, for example, the Parthenon supposedly was built with this golden ratio. And they say that this golden ratio is built into the design on this bottle. Well, the golden ratio can be built into almost anything. It doesn't mean that there's any value to it. So where is there evidence? We experimented with food, putting almonds and other dry foods in an empty carafe and foods like whole apples on top of the flared mouth of a water-filled one. The best effects seemed to come from soaking fruits and vegetables for 5 minutes or longer in water that had been in the carafe. Well, of course, soaking fruits and vegetables in any water will soften them. But there's no restructuring of the water inside of a fruit. This is just nonsense. The energy of the foods treated this way feel greatly expanded and more lively when we eat them. Yeah, so you're getting energy by eating an apple that has been soaked in water in this carafe. All right, let's push this lunacy a little bit further. Water responds to sound and light, and so do the TC Energy Design carafes. They will further energize the water inside of them. So here's their experiment. We put one of our carafes in front of a stereo speaker and played sacred music through the water, whatever sacred music means. We could feel lively changes in the environmental energies of the room immediately. When we drank the water, it felt as if the healing frequencies of music were being carried through our bodies. Pretty inventive thinking. It's like someone sat down and said to themselves, let me see, how much nonsense can we squeeze into one paragraph? But there's more. Placing a stoppered water-filled carafe under our chair improved energy flow through our bodies as we sat, increasing the benefits of meditation. We found that an unstoppered carafe seemed to expand our auras, whatever that is, the subtle electromagnetic field around our body. Ah, that's what an aura is. No one has ever demonstrated an aura. While not so practical for placing on the body during healing sessions, we have placed our carafes below our massage tables during energy healing sessions in our healing center, finding that it does add to the overall flow and rebalancing of our clients' life systems. So you say all you have to do is take one of these carafes filled with water, put it in your room, and all of a sudden, miracles will happen. And of course, people buy into this. And they will feel the placebo effect. If they think that something is really going to do them good, often it does. That's why you get testimonials like this. I drank from a delicate carafe last night and it changed my life. I was literally giddy for hours afterward. Tasted amazing. Well, maybe they put some alcohol into that bottle. That's what made them giddy. There's more. I don't believe I have ever endorsed a product before, but I moved to recommend highly the TC Energy Design Carafe. All right, listen to this. In the fall of 2008, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had a lumpectomy and 7 weeks of radiation. I healed quickly and had none of the expected side effects from radiation therapy. I did not even experience much fatigue. However, in the summer of 2009, I began to experience severe sleep disturbance and lack of energy. I used the healing modalities and crystals that I am accustomed to using, but nothing seemed to work for long. Gee, the healing crystals didn't work. I sought medical attention, but blood work and all other tests were normal. Early January, I purchased an Aladdin carafe from Mesa Creative Arts. Within a week, my sleep patterns returned to normal, as did my energy. I attribute this change to drinking the water from the carafe. Well, that's quite an attribution. Sounds to me like she was suffering from some off and on condition, and she just got better. Nothing to do with this carafe putting any energy into the water that she's drinking. Not quite silly enough yet? Well, then what about The Secret Life of Water by Masaru Emoto? Needless to say, no scientific background whatsoever. What is his claim? That you can change water crystals just by thought. Well, first of all, you have to ask the question, what are water crystals? Water is a fluid, doesn't have any crystals. But of course, you can freeze water. And when you freeze water, you get ice. Ice indeed is a crystalline material. So one supposes that this is what he's talking about. So here, A bowl containing mineral water was placed on the table in front of Daddy Junkie. I guess he's some sort of guru. And he started to meditate in front of it. And the meditation caused a change in the crystal structure of the ice. And there you see the evidence, before meditation, after meditation. Well, what are we to make of this? Absolutely nothing. We don't know where these pictures come from. I mean, they're pretty sophisticated pictures. I doubt that some sort of a guru in the Himalayas would be able to take pictures like this. So I don't know what these pictures are, but they are just different ice crystals. This before meditation, after meditation, we have no evidence that that's what these are at all. And of course, there's also such a thing as scientific plausibility. I mean, what is the chance that just having the right thoughts, looking at a piece of ice, is going to change its crystal structure? The words matter. Crystal formation is due to words and emotions. So, for example, if you're thinking of Mother Teresa when you're freezing that water, the crystals will look different than if you are thinking of Adolf Hitler. It's even difficult to say this with a straight face. It is so ridiculous. So here again is their so-called evidence, pictures of these crystals, and the only difference is what the ice was exposed to as it was freezing. If someone was muttering the word angel or the word peace, the crystals look different. As you can see, if they played the song Imagine by John Lennon, that had the result, so they suggest, of making these nice symmetrical crystals. Then, if you take water that has been infused with thoughts and then cook rice in it, so they claim there are differences. If you were thinking of love when the water was being prepared in this carafe, then cooking rice in it gives you those nice white grains of rice. If you're thinking of nothing or thinking of hate, the results are dramatically different. But all we have here are some bottles with words on them. We have no evidence of any experiment having been done. And I doubt that any experiment has been done, because whatever your thoughts are is not going to change the water that you cook your rice in. Okay, I think that's drivel. How about this? You know what this is? This is an echo bell. It's an echo bell that you can purchase. And as any bell, of course, it makes a sound, it puts out vibrations. That's what sound is. And the vibration patterns, as you see, can be played via this echo bell system. And these waves have some sort of effect on our cells. The resulting resonant fields can bring congestion back into the fine and gross levels. Again, just meaningless words. And here's how you use it. The use of Echo Bell Basic offers the possibility to supply the body's energy system with specially composed vibration patterns. What does that mean? Nothing. These are just sort of random words. But the whole idea is that when you ring this bell, the vibrations it produces can resolve energy blockages in your body. Again, another meaningless expression. Can cell shock harmonization. I have no idea what that means. Can activate via acupuncture points, which are non-existent. It can steer mental blocks. Anyway, what is really amazing about this is that people are taken in by these claims. and they actually purchase these products. And now, admittedly, you will have some people who then claim that they have benefited. The placebo effect in action. Once again, they try to produce some evidence, and who better than Einstein to say everything is energy, and that is all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. Well, that may sound scientific. The fact is, it is gobbledygook, and Einstein never said it. There are so many claims about what Einstein supposedly has said, but he certainly never said this. Okay, I still don't think we've had enough. How about this? Genuine health. We all want that. A lemon in your bedroom for several days will save your life, and maybe everything else as well. So once more, we have an interesting story here, where they have looked at a scientific paper where researchers did actual experiments with chemicals that are found in lemons, so-called polyphenols. And what these managed to do was to reduce the amount of food that is being taken in, not by people, but by a mouse. And what they suggest that it is these polyphenols that are present in lemon juice, and here's a list of those polyphenols, and as you can see, there's very little of them present, order of milligrams, that these are responsible for the lemon juice reducing the amount of food, total calories consumed by the mouse. Now that, of course, is interesting because, as you know, we have an epidemic of obesity in North America. We would like to cut down on our caloric intake. So is lemon juice the way to do it? In science, we use numbers. So let's look at some numbers. A mouse eats about 4 grams of food a day. Now, it eats mostly dry food. And if the polyphenols that we're talking about here make up about 0.5% of this, which is what this experiment was all about, they consumed about 0.02 grams of polyphenols a day. Now we, humans, eat about 2 kilograms of food a day, half of which is about dry weight. And if this were supplemented with 0.5% polyphenols, as they did in the study, in the animal study, that would mean we need 5 grams a day. Well, lemon juice contains about 0.04 grams of polyphenols per 100 mils. So what does that mean? A person would have to drink 12.5 liters of lemon juice a day to have the same polyphenol intake as the mice in the experiment. So this is essentially meaningless for humans. It's an interesting academic experiment. But to say that you should have a glass of lemon juice on your night table because it's going to have an effect on your consumption of food and caloric intake is just nonsense. But what these people are very adept at doing is twisting a bit of scientific knowledge or scientific research into an unrecognizable form. You want more? You can go on many internet websites and they will ask you whether or not something is true or not. Okay, and I get asked this question all the time. So for example here, know about your health with this method in just over a minute. You lick a spoon, you put it in a plastic bag, you expose it to light for a minute, and then you look at the spoon. If it smells putrefactive or strong, you have problems with your lungs or your stomach. If it smells sweet, you have diabetes. If it smells of ammonia, you have kidney problems. Yellow stains, your thyroid isn't working. If it's purple, you have bronchitis. If it's white, you have respiratory infection. If it's orange, you have kidney disease. Nonsense. It's hard to believe that some people would actually buy into this, but unfortunately, some do. Then we have other issues. For example, you get asked the question, are we poisoning our children with plastic? And what they're talking about here is bisphenol A, which is a component of polycarbonate plastics. Now, here's one of my pet peeves. Even though in this picture, the article is very good, and it talks about the fact that BPA is in fact unlikely to be harmful, and that's what all scientific evidence indicates, what they do is show you pictures of water bottles in the store. The implication is that that would be a source of BPA. No, these bottles are made of polyester. It's not BPA. BPA is made into polycarbonate plastics, a completely different thing. You see that in headlights of automobiles, in the shields that police carry, etc., but not water bottles. There are indeed some serious questions to ask about bisphenol A in the environment, because it does indeed have endocrine disrupting properties. But we have to look at this in the proper scientific context. We have to take a look at just to how much we are exposed and what meaningful is, how meaningful those numbers are. Indeed, we want to be careful in terms of looking at maternal intake, because it is during the development of the nervous system that endocrine disrupting substances can wreak havoc. And BPA in test tube studies does have hormone disrupting properties. So this is not something that we just want to automatically cast aside. We want to look at it. But I think suggesting that plastic, because of the trace amounts of these endocrine disrupting agents, is the next cigarette, that is just not the right way to phrase it. But at least here, there are some issues. What we need to ask is, where is the evidence? That's the question that we always need to ask in science. What do the data say? Where is the evidence for whatever claim is being made? Because without significant evidence, you can make all kinds of claims. You can say that a high-fat bacon and eggs meal is the healthiest way to start a day, and I can assure you that you can dredge up some scientific study that will show that. But you can also dredge up a scientific study to show that bacon is killing you. This is much more realistic because of the fat content and because of the possible exposure to carcinogenic nitrosamines. Then, of course, you have the whole gluten-free business. Well, of course, gluten-free is important for people who suffer from celiac disease. They really do have to stay away from gluten, even from small amounts of gluten. But this thing has gone overboard. The general population does not have to worry about gluten if they don't have celiac disease, or if they don't have something called non-celiac gluten intolerance, which is, again, a very rare condition. But look at the extreme nonsense to which this has gone, where gluten-free is absolutely everywhere. This, of course, is the ultimate drivel. So anyway, I hope that I've been able to inform you and even entertain you a little bit, by just giving you a glimpse of all of the nonsense that is out there and how important it is for us to separate the sense from nonsense. But for today, that's all, folks.